Hey everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. Today we're going to talk about something a little different. Today we're going to talk about the problem with Jim Lee. Hey everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. As always, I'm your host, Brent, and today we're going to talk about Jim Lee and DC specifically. But before we get into it, and I tell you my one little kind of weird thing I've been thinking about, I want to ask you to please subscribe. Helps me out, helps the channel grow, lets you know when I drop new videos, all that good stuff. Smash that like button. So, Jim Lee. He is the publisher. Is he still the publisher of DC? Co-publisher? I don't know what he is. I think Dan DiDio's gone, so he must be the only publisher anymore. He's been there a while. He's been at DC for a long time. He had, started at Marvel, moved over to Image, formed Wildstorm, then went to DC, sold Wildstorm to DC, I think in the 2000s, early 2000s, maybe late 1990s. I'm not sure. I was before my prime comic reading time. But as of 2003, he's been with DC pretty much exclusively. So that's almost 20 years now. And I don't have a problem with Jim Lee. I have a poster of his Batman artwork in my man cave as like the centerpiece here. I guess my gripe is not that he's a bad artist. He's a great artist. He's done phenomenal stuff. Everybody really enjoys Batman Hush. This is the Absolute Edition. Batman Hush is an interesting read because you see Jim Lee's Batman grow, specifically from like the first two issues into the last of this 12-issue run, and his style, his way of drawing Batman changes and greatly improves. He's done Justice League. He launched the New 52 with these 12 issues. He tried to do all of them. He didn't exactly get there, but that's okay. He did a nice try. Justice League Origins been an animated movie. It's like the basis for everything DC now. He did 12 issues on Superman with Brian Azzarello, which were not great, but the art is still pretty to look at, and it's Batman Hush level. He did Batman and Robin Boy Wonder. He did Superman Unchained, which I do have. I don't have it there with me. But I guess my gripe is that he is the only artist that DC seems to promote. Now, I know he's the boss, and I know he has time on his hands, I guess, because he's not drawing regular books, or maybe he wants to do as much drawing as he can, and the only way he feels he can fit it in is doing all the promotional pieces for DC. But my main gripe is anytime there's a promotion with DC, DC Fandom t-shirts, or this art installation this last year with DC Fandom, it's all Jim Lee. And I think that is my main gripe, is like DC is not Jim Lee. Jim Lee may be the boss of DC, but in terms of art and art style, it's just, even art style, it's definitely not DC. You have other capable artists at DC. I think Ivan Reis is still there. I don't know if he's under exclusive, but I haven't seen him do any Marvel stuff in a long, long time. You have artists like Dan Mora, who's on Detective, doing some fantastic fucking work. You have Jorge Jimenez, who's on Batman. He was on Justice League before then. He was on Super Sons. So I'm thinking like, maybe DC needs to stretch out a little bit and get away from being the Jim Lee show all the time in terms of their promotional artwork. Jason Fabok he was working on Three Jokers for a long, long time. He hasn't done any Marvel work or anything like that. He went straight from doing Detective Comics with John Layman into doing Justice League with Jeff Johns, and then it seems like once that New 52 Justice League was over at the Rebirth era, he started working on Three Jokers, and then he turned in 3 issues late last year or something like that, and it's going, wait, you've only worked on this like the last 4 or 5 years? What the hell have you been doing? Now, that's not to say that every comic book artist only has to work on comic books. There might be cases where they're working on brand deals or promotional products for other companies, or just doing layouts or designs, or whatever. Who knows? But in terms of what we see as the consumer, it just seems like some artists are working way more than others, and some are working way less. But even still, if you're working way less, you could have that person do things for DC for promotional artwork and let Jim Lee off the hook, so to speak. So the counterpoint to this, right, is Marvel. Marvel Comics has an artist as their lead chief creative officer. His name is Joe Quesada. He has not done any art in a long, long time. Joe Quesada does still draw. You still see him sketching on, I don't know if it's Instagram or Twitter. I think I saw one on Twitter the other day. You know, he's still sketching stuff. He still does promotional pieces for Marvel. But when there's if there's a big Marvel event, I guess these days it tends to lean more on the Marvel Studios and the movies and stuff. But they don't use Joe Quesada exclusively as their house promotional artist because he's the boss, basically. They have a wide range of styles over at Marvel. You know, they're letting their own artists do their own thing. Meanwhile, it seems like DC, even though it's not the Jim Lee show in terms of style, in terms of, you know, house style, like not every artist at DC looks like Jim Lee. Just look at Dan Mora, look at Jorge Jimenez. They're a lot more like anime influenced, I think, than they are Jim Lee influenced. Like Jim Lee influence, you can definitely see it in Jason Fabok. You know, I was pointing him out earlier. He did some action figure line. I think at the same time he was probably doing Three Jokers, so I'm sorry if I'm not trying to shame you, buddy. It's just, you know, you have Greg Capullo who's been doing a lot of work over there, specifically on Batman, metal, death metal. You know, you have a lot of artists who with a lot of talent, and to just make it the Jim Lee show for DC Fandom and this art promotion and the t-shirts, and I'm just like, I'm not sick of Jim Lee's art. I do like Jim Lee's art. I have pretty much everything he's done with DC except for that Suicide Squad run. See, I was going to be like, I have every Jim Lee thing collected or whatever, and I was like, oh wait, I never picked up Suicide Squad because it was Suicide Squad. So I'm not going to say that, but you know, I'm just thinking like the promotional stuff, you could find a different artist to do a new thing for each event. Maybe I'm just thinking that Jim Lee is a little stale. Like, it doesn't seem like he's pushing himself anymore in terms of his art, and maybe I'm saying he's stale because the only art we're seeing from him is the stale promotional stuff he's doing, right? The guy can still, like, I did buy one of those DC Fandom triptych t-shirts last year. I was hoping for another one this year. We didn't get one. You know, it's kind of old and ratty. I've worn it out so much. I might retire it and get rid of it. But everything on there was drawn by Jim Lee, and it's like, you know, he's trying to draw TV heroes and movie heroes along with the classic heroes, and everything kind of worked, but at the same time you could tell there was some stuff that just wasn't the best way to do it. Last year when they had the first DC Fandom, they made a big deal about the Fandom being designed by Jim Lee, and it's literally like Jim Lee's napkin sketch of a satellite in the sky with a dome on top or something. And it's like, you know, there are other artists at your workplace, guys, that you have under exclusive contract or are really talented and are really fast. I always wanted to bring up Dan Mora whenever I can because to me he's a fast working artist because he's doing Detective Comics right now as well as Once in Future over at Boom Studios. Now, that's what I think because they're being released concurrently. You know, you'll get an issue of Detective and then you'll get Once in Future once a month. For me, to see an artist doing 2 books in a month or releasing him at 2 books in a month is quite an accomplishment because that's the thing that, you know, artists in the 60s and 70s used to be able to do. And it seemed like as we got into the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, artists were no longer able to do that because they got more detailed, they spent more time on their pages. Meanwhile, I'm looking at stuff from Dan Mora in Detective Comics and it's super detailed. I'm looking at stuff from Dan Mora in Once in Future, and it's fucking awesome. And I'm like, man, this guy can put out 2 books a month, and then I'm still seeing Power Ranger stuff he's doing or has done that I don't know if they've held it or maybe he's doing all 3 at the same time. Now, he may not be under an exclusive contract because he's doing all this work. I'm just saying there are other talented artists at DC who are capable of doing things at the same time, right? Jorge Jimenez is doing Batman right now. He's doing a great job. That stuff looks phenomenal. The stuff on Justice League was phenomenal. The Super Sun stuff, which I didn't read, I'm sure it was phenomenal. He is a great artist. I'm trying to think of other guys. But I mean, they're all kind of in that same style, and I'm just thinking like maybe DC needs to shift its promotional stuff to maybe a younger audience to be based off a younger artist. I mean, Jim Lee is no spring chicken. He's, I think, in his 50s now or something like that. Like, he is getting up there, and I admire DC for still keeping him employed. If he's still, he's still got great ideas or something, then keep him there. That's fine. But as an artist, in terms of style, his style is very classic now, instead of in the 90s. Like, this was a very new style in the 90s, but this is the style that most artists have had for the last, 25 years or so. And now this style seems old, and you get more of these anime-influenced artists like Dan Mora and Jorge Jimenez at DC, and they're a lot more vibrant, a lot more energetic. And I'm thinking maybe DC should pull away from this classic style and move more towards that, and maybe they might engage a younger fan base, because if that's the promotional pieces they're putting out there, it may be more engaging than the classic and wonderful Jim Lee. Jim Lee never was probably meant to be a classic. When he was starting out in the 90s, he was not a classic artist. That was new, that was young, that was hip. And that is not the case anymore. Even the classic artists like this Batman over here and the Superman, that's, dollars to donuts, is probably Jose Garcia Lopez or something, who did a lot of promotional artwork. And like, I've seen more of that style of Batman because he did all the promotional artwork for DC for many, 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 many years. But I haven't read a whole bunch of Jose Garcia Lopez comics because he was doing all this promotional stuff, I think. Now, I know there's stuff out there, and people, you can point down the comments where you can go find and read Jose Garcia DC work, but I don't know of any off the top of my head. There's no collection for me to say, hey, if you want to go read Jose Garcia Lopez, here's like 6 trades in a massive, absolute. I know there's absolutes of Batman, Superman, and Justice League. These are all in absolutes, as well as omnibuses and stuff, but I'm just thinking, like, there's got to be a different way to engage a younger audience with a younger style of artist. Even Greg Capullo, his Batman stuff, his death metal stuff, is a different style than what he was doing on Spawn for so many years. He changed it up. He got looser. He got cartoonier. It's something else. It's something different. Jim Lee hasn't changed his style in, 15 years or so. And I think that's kind of hurting in terms of what DC looks like all the time. Like, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just tired of seeing Jim Lee. As much as I love him as an artist, I'm just like, I know he's like the face of the company. He's the publisher. He's the head in terms of the comic side. But, man, I really think you might be able to give him a break or give someone else a chance by giving them the promotional pieces and stuff that you're doing. I mean, a Jim Lee cover will still sell comic books. If he wants to do alternate covers and stuff as his night gig to keep himself drawing and stuff, I never want any artist to feel like they're pushed out of a job. I'm just saying there are other artists at DC that they could give this promotional work to. So, yeah, if you agree with me, let me know down below. If you think it should be all Jim Lee all the time until he's a shrunken head in a Futurama floating head cabinet and he can draw with his mind at that point, fine, let me know down below. I'm just thinking, hey, maybe you could spotlight some other people instead of being the Jim Lee promotional show all the time. Because, honestly, if he's not putting out monthly books anymore, what's to promote? You're really just promoting old collections instead of promoting, like, I think the benefit of giving a newer person a shot is you would be saying, people would go, hey, who's that artist? Oh, that's the guy that's drawing Batman right now. That's the guy that's drawing Superman right now. Oh, well, their stuff's on stands. I could go pick it up. None of Jim Lee's stuff is on stands. So I'm thinking if you get a younger style artist or an artist that's drawing a monthly book to do some of this work, even if it's multiple artists, doesn't have to just be one person doing all this promotional work. You could have people see that poster, see that image, and like that art, and then go, where can I go buy that? I want to read more of that. and you could point them to the monthly comic book rack and get them started, get their habit going, and then they can go buy the trades of the Jim Lee stuff or whatever that other artist is doing as well. Instead of going, oh, well, that's Jim Lee. Well, his stuff's in trade, so I can just order that off Amazon. You can't order a new comic book off Amazon in terms of a floppy. You can get the digital version, sure, but it's not the same thing. So I'm just thinking about the future of DC, the future of the imagery, and how, it is a little different because Marvel can't really compare and contrast because they're more focused on the movies. Every time a new movie comes out, they seem to absorb some of that movie armor or that movie costume design into their books, that story. And you'll see that as you go on. They absorb what they do in the movies in terms of visual aesthetic instead of the other way around. So if it's going to be the other way around at DC and you're going to be artist-centric and art-focused and not do what the movies are doing inside your books, then let's push some other artists. That's all I'm thinking. I don't have a problem with Jim Lee. I think he's a fantastic artist. I'm just thinking, hey, let's give some other guys a shot. So let me know down below what you think about my comments on the problem with Jim Lee. The problem with Jim Lee is that he's everywhere at DC. That's really it. That's what boils down to it. Maybe DC books would be better if he wasn't everywhere doing all this stuff at a time. I don't know. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Let me know down below what you think, and we'll see you guys next time in the Funny Pages.